Hello everyone, welcome for today's session. I'm Arifa Amini, your current equity officer. My pronouns is she, her. For visual description, I am wearing a red shirt and I have dark brown hair. I'm from Afghanistan. UCL committed to have zero tolerance to any unacceptable behavior to ensure UCL be safe, welcoming and inclusive working and learning environment for all members of the UCL community. Today, I welcome Vicky Bars from UCL Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team to discuss about how to report a harmful behavior and how will you get supported after you report an incident. Welcome, Vicky, for today's session. Can you introduce yourself and what's your role at UCL?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Vicky Bars. My pronouns are she and they. And for a visual description, I am a relatively short white person with short brown mousy hair and glasses, and I'm wearing an orange top jacket and a rainbow lanyard. And I'm going to be talking today with you about Report and Support, which is a platform that I manage at UCL.
Thank you, Vicky. Welcome. Vicky, can you explain that what is different between bullying and harassment?
Yeah, absolutely. So bullying and harassment are both behaviours that people might experience that have the purpose or effect of intimidating or creating a hostile or humiliating environment for someone. However, the difference is that under UCL's Prevention of Bullying, Harassment and Sexual Misconduct Policy and the Equality Act 2010, harassment is related to a specific protected characteristic that a person has, so for example race or disability, whereas bullying has a broader definition. There's no legal definition of bullying, so we talk about that in the context of being something that is a pattern of behaviour, so something that happens more than once, whereas harassment can be a single incident. So there is definitely some crossover, but they've also got some distinctions as well.
Thank you, Vicky. Can you explain, Vicky, that once I've made a report, what happened next?
So if you've made a report through Report and Support, you'll have filled in the online form. If you filled in the form with contact details, then it comes to me or a member of the EDI team, and we will assess who should be assigned to. So if you've selected who you want to speak to, we'll assign it to them, and that takes 5 working days. We expect someone to get back to you within that time. There are a number of different advisors who could end up being assigned, and they all have different skills and experience and different ways that they might respond to you. They may help support you resolve the issue informally, so they'll talk you through all the different ways and options of doing that, or you may choose, after talking to them, to go through the formal route. So the formal route is actually taking a disciplinary action against the person who has perpetrated the harmful behaviour, and that might follow, like depending on whether it's a member of staff that's been the perpetrator or a student. The process is slightly different, and we have loads of information on Report and Support about those processes, but that may follow a structure that looks something like writing your experience out and submitting that to HR or student casework team, depending on if it's a student or staff member. Then you may be invited to take part in an investigation, and there'll be questions asked, further statements taken. After the investigation, the information then goes to a hearing, and they usually make a decision about if the case is upheld or not. If it's upheld, then sanctions are usually applied, and then once the sanctions are applied, the person who has been reported against, so the alleged perpetrator, would have the option to appeal. So there may also be an appeal stage. So there are quite a few steps, and various advisors in Report and Support can support and advise you on those different steps.
Thank you. The procedure between formal and informal and anonymous report, is that like kind of different period, or is that like formal report is quicker or similar?
So as well as being able to report with your contact details, you can also report anonymously. I guess the difference with reporting anonymously is that we don't collect any contact information whatsoever. So when you report with contact details, you say whether you want to be contacted by telephone or email. But with reporting anonymously, we don't capture any of that whatsoever. We don't ask it, and we also don't capture it automatically through the form. The site is hosted by a third-party company. Every bit of information that comes through is encrypted. So when you report anonymously, we don't even pick up anything like an IP address. We wouldn't know where or who you are that's reporting. So you wouldn't expect to get a response. So the process, I guess, for the person reporting pretty much ends at the point at which they filled in the form. Whereas when you report with contact information, the informal process, it depends on what choices you make. So you'll be supported and guided, but sometimes, for example, it might lead to a conversation with a person in your department, and the behaviour may end and it will be resolved fairly quickly. Other times there may be a larger amount of, say, coaching that's provided by, say, a dignity advisor, and that might be 2 or 3 meetings over the course of 6 weeks to have, support and conversations about getting all of the various informal actions and support in place. So it varies depending on the case, but yeah.
Thank you, Vicky. Vicky, can you tell me that more about informal processes and what would be my options?
Yeah, so once you've submitted, you will speak to an advisor and they will give you an array of sort of options available to you. Most of the time they will recommend that you make a record of the behaviour you've experienced. This is really useful to do as soon as, or as close to the thing that you've experienced. As time goes on, our memories start to fade, and so having that, whether or not you choose to act on it, is really useful to have that account for yourself. The next thing is that you will be offered the option to directly speak to the person who has perpetrated the harmful behaviour. This may or may not feel appropriate for you, so it's an option that you can absolutely discount if you want to. But if it is something you feel comfortable doing, say, for example, the person has been portraying bullying behaviour and you feel comfortable asking them to stop that behaviour, you may be supported and coached in doing that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, which is absolutely fine, then you may want to escalate to someone within the department. So speaking to a personal or graduate tutor or a programme lead to ask them to have a conversation with the person to cease their behaviour. An alternative option may be also that you go through some form of formal mediation. So that can be arranged through the student mediator, which is one of the roles that you can request to speak to through report and support, and she can support that mediation if appropriate. In many cases, say for example in the case of sexual violence, we wouldn't recommend mediation. Those are the different sort of informal approaches. If an informal approach doesn't work, there's always however many of those informal approaches you try, there's always the option to take a formal disciplinary. So if it's about a member of staff, it would be the staff disciplinary process, and if it's about a student, it would be the student disciplinary process.
In some cases, when students struggle to not get support from personal tutor because they are not that much having information, what do you think where the student can go?
So the casework team is probably the best place to have a conversation with. They're responsible for student conduct.
Okay.
So student casework is an option you can select when you report and support. So if you've already attempted an informal route and that's not gone anywhere, the next best thing I think to do is to escalate it. They will talk you through the next steps.
Thank you, Vicky. Vicky, for example, if I send a report, who will see it and who will contact me afterwards?
So when you submit a report, it's held confidentially. It's reviewed in the first instance by the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion team. A lead administrator is assigned within that, so it's often me or one of my colleagues. And we will look at your request to speak to an advisor. We will then assign it to the advisor. The report stays confidentially between the team and the advisor. It isn't shared with your tutors or anyone in your halls, or there'll be no members of staff that you don't expressly want to see it that will see it. And then in terms of which advisors you can choose from, so you can make a selection, or you could say I don't know, and we will make that for you based on the information you put within it. So the options are to speak to human resources, so you might want to do that as a student if it's about a member of staff that's the perpetrator. Dignity advisors are our volunteer roles that are staff members across the university who are doing support and advice as a volunteer on top of their day jobs, and there's more information about them on our website. There's the Crime Prevention and Personal Safety Advisor who works in the security team in estates, and who you can speak to if it might be related to something like a hate crime. There's also the Student Support and Wellbeing team, so if you're looking more for kind of support that might be like psychological, emotional support, they're available for that. The Student Mediator, who can give advice and guidance about informal and formal processes and also provide mediation. And the Student Casework team, who again can give advice about this informal and formal processes, and they can also initiate a formal disciplinary against a student as well.
Vicky, can you tell me that how long it should take for someone to contact me about my report? If I don't hear anything like from anyone, is there someone I contact and to follow up my case?
Yeah, we aim to get back to students within 5 working days. So if you don't hear anything within 5 working days, and remember sometimes we've got bank holidays, closures, things like that, so just be mindful around those periods of time. But yeah, if it's normal 5 working days and you don't hear back, students can send a follow-up email to equalities@ucl.ac.uk. You don't need to include any details of the report, just your name and saying that you've submitted a report, and someone should get back to you from the Equality and Diversity team.
What will happen to me if I make a report? Will people on my course or other university will know about it or find about it?
If you make a report, we won't share that information with people on your course or at other universities. It's absolutely only shared on a need-to-know basis. So we may end up escalating on some very rare circumstances, perhaps where someone's at risk of hurting themselves or others. But ordinarily, we will always say who is going to be seeing that information. So once you've been, assigned an advisor, they will tell you if they need to share it with anyone else, who they'll be sharing it with and why. But it doesn't just get sent to your course or sent to, your friends or anything like that. Unless you choose to tell those people, we won't.
Yeah, it's very confidential. Thank you, Vicky. Can you tell me that will I be told of any formal, informal outcome made as a result of my report?
So there are a few different things to consider in terms of the information that we give to the reporting party after the report. If you've reported anonymously, we won't be able to give any direct feedback to you about what's happened. However, we do report annually on the actions that we take as an institution in an annual report, which you can also find on the support section of Report and Support. That details sort of interventions and campaigns that we run based on the data we get from the anonymous reporting. In terms of an informal resolution, that conversation should definitely be an ongoing conversation with you as the reporter, and you will find out what's happening with the people that you're working with. So whether that's people within your department, whether that's people in some of the central services and advisors that you might have selected, any informal action, you should find out what's happening ongoing. The more formal processes, it depends on the level of detail that we feel it's appropriate to share with you. But the intention in UCL is always to share as much information as possible. However, it's important to recognise that could end up being sensitive information about the reported party. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we have an interim measures process that we do at the start of formal disciplinary for students, and that might decide that the reported party can't use the library on set days. You would be informed of those set days because the whole purpose of that interim measure is to make sure that you feel safe on campus and to limit contact between you and that person. So you would be informed about decisions that are made like that. You would also be informed of when investigations are taking place, when hearings are taking place, when an outcome has been decided. What students might not find out is the detail of a sanction that's been applied, because that becomes the personal data of the person who is being accused.
Vicky, can you tell me that where can I go to get support at UCL?
So there are a couple of places that UCL offer support. Through Student Support and Wellbeing, you can get in touch with the Student Psychological and Counselling Services. They provide short-term counselling, cognitive behavioural therapy and psychiatric and psychoeducational support, and you can contact them either through their general inquiries number or through Ask UCL. They can also refer students who have experienced sexual violence onto support services like our rape crisis support worker, who comes to campus to meet students who have experienced sexual violence and support them. An alternative option is to get in touch with the Students' Union UCL's advice service. So that's a free, confidential and importantly independent advice service, and they can support students with a range of issues, including if they've experienced harmful behaviour. The Students' Union Advice Centre is also a hate crime reporting centre, and there are also members of staff who are trained as sexual violence liaison officers, so they can provide a series of support depending on what you've experienced.
Can you tell me that what if department choose not to act on a report which has been raised?
Yeah, we work as the EDI team, we work really closely with HR business partners, faculties and departments to try and encourage them to take action on any reports that they receive. We give them a series of training and support in order to do that. It's important to be clear though here that if you've reported anonymously, you won't get any direct feedback on any action that's taken. We do review, read and pass on that information to the department on an anonymous basis, and they might have an interventional conversation. So they might approach someone and say, we've been made aware there have been some issues in your area. Are you and your team all aware of our prevention of bullying, harassment, sexual misconduct policy? Do you know what's expected of you? Does your staff know what's expected of them? Do your students know what are expected of them? Depending on the situation. We may run additional training in areas. We may also, if there's a pattern of behaviour and it's not necessarily about an individual, but it might be about cultures that are happening within the department, we might run an environmental investigation. And also, so those are all the things we can do if you report anonymously, but we won't be able to tell you that action's been taken. So it's important to, if you do want direct feedback, to fill in the contact with form with your information and contact details. When you do that, you should get information back about the action that's taken. However, we'll be honest, like if there's not happening, you should escalate it. So you can follow up with the equalities team. You can follow up with the sort of head of department, perhaps. It's always like potential escalation routes that you can take if you're unhappy with the lack of action that's taken as a result of a report.
Vicky, imagine like if one of my friends has said they are bullied, harassed, and have been sexually assaulted. So how can I help and support them?
So we have a page called How Do I Support? I want to support someone, I think is the name of the page, on our support section of the website. That guides you through sort of how to respond to a disclosure. It gives advice and tips on that. I think the first thing to say is that it may not recognise it as a disclosure in the first place. So someone might come to you and just say they're struggling to keep up with their workload, or they don't want to go into their lectures. Like, it can often start like that, and it may evolve into one. I think it's important to thank the person, and it's an act of trust for them to tell you that. So first and foremost, acknowledge that they've told you something difficult, thank them for doing so. Encourage them to speak in their own words, try not to put words in their mouth, and if you're going to ask questions, do so with sort of the who, what, where, when questions. Don't ask why questions. Why questions can be really accusatory. They can make people feel like whatever's happened to them was their fault, and it's really important that we don't do that. We, as the person receiving the disclosure, it's really important that you state your boundaries, so when you'll continue to be available. So it's really tempting to say, oh yeah, like just get in touch with me whenever, this is really difficult and really hard for you, so I'm just constantly available. But that's might not be true. Like, you might have a part-time job, you might have childcare responsibilities, you might have a club or society that you're involved in and you're not available when you've got training, or so just saying I'm available on these times, these days, in these ways is really helpful for the person to really know that that's an honest and genuine offer. Assure them that they have options available, so you can talk them through some of the information that you've hopefully learned from this conversation that we've had today. All the people watching have learned from this conversation today.
Yeah.
Be clear about what information you might need to pass on to someone else. So if they're particularly distressed, they maybe tell you that they're suicidal. You might need to escalate that to another person to get support. It might not be something you can keep to yourself. If you're really worried about someone's well-being, you should definitely get in touch with Student Support and Wellbeing and escalate that through them. But they will keep that confidential. So this doesn't mean posting it on social media and telling all your friends.
Yeah.
It is okay to pass that information on if you're particularly worried about someone. But be honest with them that you're going to do that. Tell them that that's something you'll have to do, and you understand that they might not want that. And then once they've made a decision about what next steps they want to do, respect that decision, which can be really difficult if it's not the decision that you would have taken, but it's really important in terms of people reasserting their own agency that they get to make that choice for themselves about what they want to do next. So yeah, giving them all the options, and then if they choose not to do anything about it, whilst that can be really hard to hear, that might just be what's right for them right now, and they might just need ongoing support rather than wanting to take any action.
Yeah, that's actually very, very important, that we have to understand the sensitivity of the issues, that how our action can have a significant impact on the person that have experienced this incident.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few more other things there are just around, in particular, if someone's experienced sexual assault, there are some key things to think about. So show empathy and understanding. Condemn the unacceptable behaviour, let them know that it's absolutely not their fault, and provide options about what they can do next.
How do you think that we can boost their confidence if they're very insecure and not try to report harmful behaviour? How can we help them to boost their confidence?
I think, it depends on who you are. You might have limited skills and experience. We're not trained professionals in this area, and I think it's really important that we give them all of the options and the advice that's available. So letting them know who is there, who they can call. There are lots of support services. We have them listed on Report and Support, who have sort of free confidential advice lines. So that might feel like a much easier step to do, to just phone an anonymous helpline and get some advice rather than going and booking a meeting or putting something on Report and Support. So there are loads of steps that people can go through before they choose to sort of initiate something formally with the university that can be really supportive and guiding in doing that. But yeah, ultimately we have to sort of gently guide people and respect where they're at.
Vicky, can you just tell me that what is done with all the anonymous reporting data you collect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we compile the data and we do sort of trend analysis on it. So we work out what issues are happening at UCL, who they're happening to, who they're done by, and then we work on interventions to respond to that. We work on the basis of every year. We produce an annual report that looks at the data across the course of the academic year, and we publicly publish that. And then we also provide analysis for faculties on an annual basis as well, and we speak with them about the different actions they can take as a result of that. They're all publicly available on Report and Support. We also, as a result of the sort of information that we get from those trend analysis, we do lots of training and intervention work. So we run something called Where to Draw the Line training with academic departments, so all staff in academic departments take part in that. We have something called Taking the Lead that we get senior staff at university to take part in. And there are training programmes like the Active Bystander training programme that the Students' Union run that are aimed at student cohorts to support them in being able to intervene when they witness something that's harmful happening. So yeah, there's lots of different things that we do in response to that. We also do environmental investigations. Mm-hmm. So if we see a pattern of issues happening in a particular department, we take that and we will look at it's a cultural audit. So we basically go and have conversations with students and staff to find out what the issues are and come up with an action plan to address those issues.
Thank you, Vicky, for to coming today and give a very comprehensive information about how to report harmful behavior and what happened next. Thank you, those of you today joined with us, and I hope this session was useful and you learn how to use the report and support system. If you want to learn more, please go to the report and support webpage and find relevant information. I hope today's sessions was useful and you can take away relevant information to take action any harmful behavior you experience.